Alright, in this video, we're going to review homeostasis and why is it important. You should have some guided notes to fill in the blanks along the way. This is just kind of a general overview of several examples of how our bodies maintain balance. Okay, so get those notes ready. Homeostasis, by definition, is the state of balance that living systems maintain to keep their internal physical as well as chemical conditions stable. Well, that's a mouthful, but go ahead and write that down. Okay, fill in the blanks there, and we're going to go through a few different examples of what this means. Okay, so we are maintaining balance in our physical and chemical conditions. Okay, so homeostasis is any automatic, so some kind of process that we don't even think about, that a living thing uses to keep its body steady on the inside while continuing to adjust to conditions outside of the body or in its environment. Okay, so this is an automatic process. We don't have to think about it for it to happen. Okay. That is homeostasis. So several different descriptors of it, several different definitions. Okay, when we go outside in the winter, we bundle up to stay warm, but if our body temperatures get a little too cold, right, a little too low, we start to shiver, right? This is a response by our bodies to start generating more energy so that we will generate heat. Okay, we are actually using energy, sorry, I said that wrong. We're using energy to to shake our muscles, and this generates heat. When we rub our hands together or when we start to move, our bodies generate heat and it'll get our temperature up to where our body needs it to happen. When we shiver, we don't think about this. This is an automatic process, homeostasis. Okay, so in response to the cold, the body will shiver to generate heat and sometimes even create goosebumps in order to maintain a constant body temperature. The goosebumps bit is something that furry mammals will do as well, but they'll kind of create goosebumps to make the fur or the hair stand up on their skin, and that'll kind of trap in a little more warm air. Kind of cool. All right, here we have a cat scaring a dog. Okay, what happens in our bodies when we are fearful, when we're scared? When we're scared, our bodies set up a fight or flight response. A lot of hormones are involved in this. Our blood pressure and our heart rate increase, and adrenaline is a hormone, is produced to help us either run or fight, right? Fight or flight. I think since this definition came out, a lot of times people add also freeze, fight, flight, or freeze response. When we are hungry, it's one of my children eating my birthday cake. Okay, she was hungry enough and helped herself. Okay, when we're hungry and ready to eat, our mouths produce saliva, and they produce it more readily, okay, so more rapidly, to help digest the incoming food. Okay, we anticipate that food is going to come into our mouths, and we start salivating. Okay, when we're dehydrated, when we don't have enough water in our bodies, the brain sends out signals to motivate us to act in a way to address that thirst and hunger, okay, encouraging us to eat. When we've eaten enough, those signals are sent, different signals are sent to the brain that we are full. Okay, sometimes we have to tell children and maybe ourselves to slow down because our brains haven't gotten the message from our stomachs yet that we have eaten enough and we can be done. Okay? It takes time to communicate between cells in the body. All right, here we've got two runners. We know that, this is a funny t-shirt, but sweat is not just fat crying, because fat is lipids, right? Sorry. Sweat is a solution made of electrolytes and water from our bodies. This is my son in cross country. Okay, when we are running races like this, when we're using a lot of ATP, In a strenuous activity, our bodies respond by increasing our heart rate, blood pressure, and respiration, as well as perspiration, right? Sweating, to make sure that we have the necessary oxygen in our bodies, in our cells. We need to be able to get rid of the carbon dioxide as a waste product and still maintain the right body temperature. Okay, so the heart rate increases, blood pressure increases, and the respiration increases, and we start sweating to cool our bodies down, but also make sure all of our muscles and organs have enough oxygen. Okay. I don't know if anyone knows what this is. Okay. This is a blood glucose meter. If you have diabetes, this is something that will probably keep you alive every single day. Okay. A diabetic has to test their blood daily, several times a day, maybe more frequently than that. And this is because our blood glucose levels have to be maintained at a certain level, just like our temperature. Okay? When our blood glucose levels go below a certain level, hormones like insulin are produced, enabling more glucose to be released into the bloodstream. Why do we need glucose? Well, glucose is our fuel, right? The fuel goes into the mitochondria to produce ATP. If we don't have enough blood glucose, then we don't have the fuel that our cells need to make the ATP, and you might pass out. Okay? You might go into a coma. You'd probably have some warning signs before that, but it is not good. You'll probably feel sick first, right? Okay, woo, kind of creepy picture here, but this person is in a dark room, and look how big their pupils got. They didn't have to think about this at all, but their pupils are enlarging to collect more light in order for them to see. Okay, this takes a few seconds to respond, but your body knows that it needs to enlarge the pupil. This person is in a very light room, or maybe they've got a light shining in their eye, and their pupil has gotten very, very small. This is the same thing, right? The pupil is large in this guy, small in this person. I don't know what tendencies are. Okay, this is part of homeostasis. We want to make sure we're not getting too much light, just enough light in our pupils in order to see. Okay, so when we're in a dark place, our pupils dilate, or they get bigger, to allow for more light to enter. When we are in a light place, our pupils constrict. Okay, this means to grow smaller, to do the opposite. I'll give you a few seconds to fill those in. Pause it if you need to. All right, we have some fish and a seagull here on this slide. I had to think a second as to why these are up here. These are examples of how organisms are able to regulate salt concentrations, right? We've been talking about osmosis and how water moves towards the salty side of the membrane, right? Osmosis allows water to move across the membrane, and certain organisms live in very salty environments, okay? And these organisms that do so have special ways to make sure that their cells still have enough water. Okay? They don't want to lose the water to the outside environment, because this fish is probably soaking in a hypertonic ocean, right? This seagull is in the ocean, constantly exposed to hypertonic conditions. So what do they do to make sure that their cells don't dry out? Well, saltwater fish have very concentrated urine, okay, because the water is retained in the cells. Okay, they have special cells that allow the water to stay retained in there, and they have mechanisms to concentrate the urine, put out a lot of salt in their urine. Seabirds have a nasal gland, okay, something in their nose that allows them to excrete or squeeze out salt after they drink salt water. Kind of cool adaptations there. All right, homeostasis happens in other organisms as well. These are sunflowers, Maybe you guys have heard about this. This is heliotropism, okay, growing towards the sun. Soybeans as well are able to do this. They adjust the amount of sunlight that they are getting on their leaves by moving them. Okay, so plants depend on photosynthesis and sunlight for their food, right? That's how they're making their glucose. Sunflowers are able to track the sun to maximize the amount of sunlight that they are exposed to. Soybeans, on the other hand, cannot tolerate too much direct sunlight, and they will raise their leaves at noon when the sun is the highest to avoid this. That way the sun kind of skims off the surface instead of hitting it directly on the leaves. Kind of cool, right? Okay, so these two are examples of homeostasis in plants, right? So hopefully that gives you an idea of what homeostasis is. It's the balance that that living organisms need to maintain in order to stay alive. Our bodies are incredibly well coordinated. They communicate between cells and between organ systems through hormones and proteins, and osmosis kicks in and makes sure that concentrations aren't too high or too low. Okay, so hopefully this is helpful to explain what homeostasis is, and hopefully that gives you an idea of how well our bodies are built. That's it.